What's up, Marathon? I'm your host, John Kissick, the podcast show all about Marathon and what's happening and all the ins and outs of the city of Marathon. So today, we're going to dispel all the myths and rumors that are flying around Facebook about the Marine Sanctuary. And none better than to have the superintendent of the Florida Keys Marine Sanctuary on the show, Sarah Fangman. So sit back and let's educate ourselves about what's happening with the sanctuary. Okay, so Sarah Fangman, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And I have you here today because there's a lot of controversy about what's going on. So describe to us what the purpose of the sanctuary is.
So the overall purpose of the sanctuary is to make sure that the resources that we all enjoy and use and depend upon are there into the future so that they can be used and enjoyed well into the future. So protect, but also balance that with use. That is our mandate.
Okay, and so the overall goal of the sanctuary is to accomplish regrowth of the sanctuary.
It is
these areas?
Yeah. Well, it's to protect these precious resources, and it was established as a national marine sanctuary, recognizing that we don't have anything like this anywhere else in our country. It is truly a national treasure, like the Grand Canyon, like Yellowstone. These are places that we don't have them everywhere, and so we need to make sure that they're recognized as being incredibly special, protected, so that we can continue to use them, benefit from them, and depend upon them.
Okay. In the last meeting, we had a low turnout, which I thought was a low turnout in Marathon. And how does that compare to you had one already in Key West, and now tonight you're going to have another meeting in Key Largo?
Yes.
Okay. So, I was surprised that there's a low turnout because of how much buzzword it was about the sanctuary. So,
well, and I guess it's all being compared to the turnout in Key West, which was, of course, very high. That said, 200 people is still a lot of people to come out for a public meeting, a government-invited public meeting on a Monday night. So by comparison to other meetings we've had and other, city council meetings, et cetera, I think it's pretty impressive that 200 people took their time to come and listen, ask us questions to try to understand what it is that's being proposed.
Okay. Now, with all these proposals going on, how long do the restrictions last? Are they short term? Are they 20 years, 30 years, or is it indefinite?
That's a great question. And first of all, it's really important for your audience to know that these are proposals. They're not decisions. And so we have a long way to go before we've got anything codified and formally changed. That said, once we do, they will be on record. They will become, permanent until another process like this occurs. In other words, another process where we look at how we're managing this place, and if something changes that requires us to consider those adjustments, then we'll do that. And that's part of what we're trying to accomplish, is sort of adaptive management, managing this place, reflecting upon what's happening with the resources.
Okay. Now, I guess the other buzzword is the wording that was in the first proposal.
Yes.
So do you want to say this is a first draft?
Yes.
This isn't the final word.
That is
this
correct.
This is not written in stone.
That is correct.
So everybody that says it, they're going to do whatever they want.
Well, I want to address that notion because I've heard that a lot. There is a lot of distrust. There's a lot of distrust of us, the sanctuary, the federal government, and I really regret that because we genuinely are trying to include people in this. This has been a multi-year process. This is not something that just sort of sprung up and we dropped on people. This has been a very inclusive process. Now, not everybody was a part of that process. Maybe they didn't know about it. Maybe they didn't understand what we were trying to do, but we had over 70 public meetings already to get to where we are.
Wow.
And all the information on those meetings are on our website. So if people want to learn about that process, the extensive public process, they can go on our website and they can see who's on different committees that have been discussing discussing this, what was discussed at the different meetings, what was voted on, what presentations were given. There's a ton of information. So for people who think that we're just going to do what we want to anyway, it's hard for me to conceive of that. We would never, if we thought we or wanted to just do whatever we wanted, why would we take years and years of public process and input to get to where we are? Why would we do that? And then secondly, we know that a decision made with public input and public support is going to be more successful. So it doesn't make any sense for us to just shove something down this community's throat. That is not what we're trying to do. We are trying to get the input of the community. We're trying to shape this, make it better so that we can all support it and believe that we are making progress for protecting and using these resources.
All right. So the $1 million question, the wording that you have now says, does it or does it not say it's restricted to the Blue Star program only?
Yes, and that was really regrettable on our part. We should have been much more explicit about what we were proposing relative to local access. And because we didn't provide that explicit definition of how locals would access these places, that has been interpreted to mean we intend to exclude people. And that is not our intention. What we did articulate was one idea for how to reduce the number of people on a given spot, testing this idea, and that one proposal was limited to Blue Star operators. Now, clearly a lot of people don't like that, and that is why we're having this process. Again, these are not decisions. This is the opportunity for our community to weigh in. And the whole reason this idea of limited entry even is in the proposal is because the community told us, we think there are some places that are getting too many people. It's not as much fun to go there. If it's so crowded, we should consider what would it look like to limit access to a few places. So if people don't agree that that's an issue, fine. We don't have to do that. But we've heard from a lot of people who do think that overcrowding is an issue in some of these places.
Sure. That's the other question that's come up is why would you let the cattle boats come?
Yes, I get that.
And that's so many people that come. And
yes.
And I understand the Blue Star. Maybe you can explain the Blue Star certification.
Yes.
If that's the correct wording.
So the Blue Star program is a recognition program. First, it's important to know it's voluntary. There's some information out there that people are saying that you have to pay to be a part of that. That is not accurate. It is voluntary. Anybody can be a part of that.
Okay.
They have to agree, though, to participate in the framework. And there's an articulated framework that describes if you are going to be recognized as a part of this program, here are the things you agree to doing. And they are things like training your own staff so that your own staff know how to make sure they're following the rules and that they're providing sustainable practices in their operations out on the water. Then also, importantly, for dive and snorkel operators is agreeing to also provide briefings and information to the divers and the snorkelers you're taking out on the reef, because studies have shown that people who get just a short briefing, a little bit of information about what they should and should not do when they're in the water, are much more likely to not impact those resources. So that is the Blue Star program. It is, again, one way to propose potentially limiting access, not the only way. Through this process and through this conversation, thankfully, this is spurring a lot of ideas coming to us. Why don't you just put a certain number of moorings, for example?
Right.
Once those are full, then the area is full and people have to go elsewhere. There's lots of good ideas bubbling up through this process.
Okay, that's great. So now, with the Blue Star program, I've heard other people think, oh, it's impossible to get the Blue Star certification. So
no. In fact, we've gotten a lot of calls from people wanting to join the Blue Star program, which is fantastic. That said, we're reminding them, look, this is not a decision. And so just by joining Blue Star right now doesn't mean you're going to have exclusive access to anywhere, because this is just a proposal. So we'd love to have you join this program. We think it's a valuable program. That said, it's not a ticket to anything yet.
Right. Okay. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
So of all the rumors and non-truths that you've heard, what are explain some of those to us that you're hearing you'd like to clear up?
I think a lot of the confusion and frustration has centered around the no access and our intention, perceived intention, to limit access to locals. And that is, again, not what we're trying to do. I have a boat. I like to go out and spend time on the water myself. So we're not trying to limit how locals get to use these resources. So that's a rumor that's out there. There's also a lot of rumors going around with regard to backcountry closures. And I think some of that confusion has to do with the fact that people didn't know there are already wildlife management areas in the backcountry. And so some of that is new to people. And then also some ideas that we're closing off some of the great sandbars. So yes, we have some proposals for additional protections at snipe, but that's not closing everything, and it's not even addressing areas where people like to hang out. Same with Marvin and some of the other backcountry areas. People think we're shutting everything down, and that's not accurate.
Okay. For the most part of the marathon, there is proposed no motor area. People are concerned they can't get out of their canals.
Yes,
But
thank you
that's
for mentioning that. Thank you
another
for mentioning.
rumor?
We've got a map here that shows these are a series of boxes, if you will, that have channels in between them. And then people can get out of their canals and navigate safely and within the rules. So it is not true that if people think, oh my goodness, I'm going to be stuck in my canal, I can only go back and forth in my canal now. That's not the proposal. That's not our intention. And that if you really zoom in on these, you can see that we are allowing access through there, just trying to keep people off of places they already want to be off of, which is the really shallow seagrass area. Nobody really wants to be boating on top of that.
No.
So anyway, that's what that is.
Okay, so anyway, the oceanside shoreline, you can't really drive through anyway. It's so shallow.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because only a few flats boats that do bowling netting at night,
Right.
that would be an issue. But there's plenty other places to go to. So
Yep.
you will be able to get out of your canal.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
And you can.
Yes, you don't have
go
to just
out.
pace up and down your
Nope.
canal with your boat.
Okay. Now, how does this impact the fishing industry? I know there's a lot of charter captains at the meeting in Marathon. And how will this impact them? Are those areas that they typically fish in or set lobster traps? And also other questions were if there was a storm and their traps went into these areas, are they allowed to motor in there and get them back out?
That's a great question. That's actually the first time I've heard that one. But with regard, there's a lot of different elements to these proposals. So not surprisingly, they have different levels of interaction or impact to the different fisheries. And so, some of these are in the backcountry, in the flats, no motor areas, which in some cases the fishermen who do flats fishing really support that because it allows them to have protections to some of their important habitats. And they can still get in there as long as they pull in and they can continue to fish. In other cases, like I'm looking at the map in front of you, the Long Key, Tennessee Reef area, we're hearing a lot from both flats fishermen and trap fishermen that is a really, really challenging proposal for them. So we're having really good conversations with them about what would make sense to do. Is there somewhere else that would be better to achieve what we're trying to achieve there? That very large area was proposed as a part of this working group process and as a part of the Sanctuary Advisory Council process because it was recommended that we need to protect large contiguous habitat types. And we didn't have anything like that in the Upper Keys. So propose something, that's what we put out there. If it's not the right place, tell us a better idea for how we accomplish that objective.
Okay, and so what is the plan for enforcement? So once we have these in place, and then it's the FWC's job to enforce this?
So we have law enforcement agreements with the state of Florida. And so, yes, FWC does a lot of law enforcement with us. And by the way, 60% of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is in state waters. So it is co-managed. And these proposals have been developed also in coordination with the state, both DEP and FWC. We also work with the Coast Guard on enforcement. We also work with NOAA law enforcement. So there's multiple entities that are enforcing these regulations that we already have in place and that would be involved in helping to enforce them. Now, that said, there would, depending upon what actually ultimately comes out of this public process and through this decision-making process, we would have to do a lot of education to make sure that people understood what changes. And we've got a lot of plans in place for how we would do that. Of course, we can't start until we know what it is the ultimate decision will be. And there's a long road ahead of us before we have that decision, because these comments that we're getting, we're going to take them, synthesize the input, and then put out another single alternative, a single proposal that people will have a chance to comment on again. So as I noted, it's a long road to get us to the final outcome on this.
So would the addition of mooring balls in some of these areas, is that one of the proposals, that
Yep.
we add mooring balls and you can only hook up to a mooring ball? That would help eliminate the anchor dragging through the reef?
Definitely. Moorings and additional moorings will, without a doubt, be a part of this proposal, assuming there's any changes. But we're already starting to talk about places where we're proposing no anchor zones. Can we put in moorings so that people can still go there without having to drop an anchor but still enjoy it? And so we're definitely taking those kinds of ideas. Where would we put them inside of this area? How many should there be? That's the kind of input we really want people to be helping us and providing to us through this process.
Okay, so right now it's pretty, a topic in everybody's home right now. Like a year, 2 years down the road, people start forgetting about it. How do we keep the education process going to keep that? And also, this is a two-part question, people from out of town, they've never heard this, that they come in, they launch their boat, and they go out to these areas. How do we educate them?
That's a
not
great
to do that?
question. It's a real challenge. So to your first point, what's going to happen is when this public comment period closes, which is scheduled to close at the end of January, we will take all of this input that we've been receiving through the public process, and we will, again, generate a single comment. That's going to go back out. So I think it's going to be fresh enough in people's mind that that comes back out again, they're going to want to engage. So I'm not terribly worried about people sort of forgetting about this and disengaging. I think people have demonstrated they care, and they want to make sure that their voices are heard. So that's going to happen. With regard to people from elsewhere, and that is a huge challenge, and that is why we have things like the Blue Star program, because part of the Blue Star program is educating the people that come here from Iowa or Nebraska or New York or Washington, D.C. You're in a special place. Here's what you need to know. Here's how you need to help us protect it. We have a lot of education and outreach programs. We're working on developing some apps so that people can come here, can learn this stuff. So that's absolutely part of what we're thinking about, was we're developing these proposals to make sure we find a way to help people understand what it is, what the rules are. Because I believe most people want to follow the rules. They just don't necessarily know what they are.
Sure. And a lot of people are inexperienced boaters, and they're not familiar with the waters here. And they don't know.
That's right.
I've seen, people with rental boats driving through seagrass beds.
And we developed a boater education program for that purpose. It's online, it's free, it's voluntary, it's in English and it's in Spanish. If we could get people who rent boats to others to encourage their their guests to go online, take 30 minutes to just learn that, I think it would really, really help, because these waters are hard to navigate. It can be a lot shallower after you leave the dock, which people aren't used to if they come from somewhere else. So we really need to work on educating people, because you're right, they don't always really appreciate that.
Okay, so how about, can we add signs or some type of literature at boat ramps?
Yep. Yes.
Is that part of your proposal? Or?
Yes, and we've got some signs at some boat ramps right now. We need to update them. Don't want to update them until we know if and how the rules are going to change, so we'll definitely do some of that. We also spend a lot of time, again, in the community trying to raise awareness. So as far as signs out on the water, we're also hearing, surprisingly, from a fair number of constituents saying we think there should be more markers out on the water, not moorings and not zone markers, but channel markers. And so for a long time, I think people resisted that because they thought that would be visually unappealing, and it might help the yahoos who don't know what they're doing feel more emboldened to go into the backcountry where maybe they shouldn't be. But I think some people are starting to come to the realization that They're going back there anyway. We need to help them not run aground and tear up our seagrass habitat.
Is there any money in the budget? Maybe have a commercial that broadcasts like Miami and so on, that so these people can say, oh, there's new rules in the sanctuary. Make sure you pick up a pamphlet at whatever, Welcome Center on your way down.
That's a great idea. That's a really great idea. We haven't talked about that yet, but I think should we have significant changes as a result of all this, we're going to have to be doing exactly like you described, getting the word out big time. Right now, we're kind of focused on listening and hearing from people, and then once we know what we're going to do, then we have to really articulate how in the heck are we going to implement these things. We're starting to think about it. We're taking those kinds of suggestions, but we don't have an explicit plan until we have explicit decisions.
Okay.
That's a ways from now.
Okay, great. And how about we create more artificial reefs? So it'll take some of that burden off the reefs, like sink more boats or airplanes or something that will draw people off the reef, and the divers can go over there, and fishermen as well, because that attracts fish.
Yep, that has come up. Even before this process, there was some conversations about a large artificial reef project up here in the Marathon area. And I've certainly heard it as a part of this process too. What I will say is our plan focuses more on natural restoration versus artificial reef creation of habitat. So we've got, in our plan, most people are paying close attention to the regulatory aspects, but there's a whole lot in there that has nothing to do with regulations. And included in the non-regulatory side of this proposal is a lot of work on restoration. And so we're really focusing on how do we restore these reefs naturally so that they regenerate, so that, because an artificial reef doesn't really regenerate, it doesn't get bigger. It might grow stuff on it and it serves its purpose right where it is. But a natural reef can seed other areas next to it and help really facilitate natural regrowth. And that's what we're focusing more of our attention in our plan currently.
Okay, so that would involve the micrographing of corals.
Yep, and the Florida Keys has been a leader pioneering some of these techniques. It's happening all around the world. They've been exported from here, these techniques. People are learning new things. We're talking about bringing back what everybody else is learning through their tweaks and how they're doing in other parts of the world, and really scaling up and taking the restoration work that we've been doing here to the next level so it can really have an ecological impact.
Oh, let's go back to the app you described. Do you have a plan to educate people to download this app when you come down? And then the app, will that tell you where not to go? Is it the GPS oriented?
So we are working on developing an app that we hope can be a part of this process, and that is contain a lot of good information about where you are and what do you need to know about where you are. Not just what are the rules, but also what are you likely to see there. So, certainly, hey, did you know you're not supposed to fish here, or please don't touch the coral, or whatever may apply in a given spot, but also, hey, and you're likely to see the following types of corals, or, there's a shipwreck right over there if you swim. And this app, right now, we're working on potentially having it connected to little transmitters on our mooring buoys and our marker buoys. And that way, they can know where the boater is and then provide that much better information. It's still in development, so we may not need that. There's a lot of technological aspects of this that the developers are working on. But conceptually, what we want to do is be able to have a really easy tool people can download onto their phone and then use that to make sure that they know what and where as they're out enjoying these waters.
Sure. I think everybody's phone now has GPS on it, so that's probably the simplest solution. That you know where you're at, know where not to go.
Yep.
And,
It's really exciting, the possibilities for what we can transmit. And in an ideal world, wouldn't it be cool if we could say, for example, you before you leave the dock, you can look at Lou Key and say, I really like mooring ball number whatever. Is somebody on it? And wouldn't it be cool if it could tell you, there's 12 boats right in that area. You know what? Today I'm going to go someplace else. So it could be something that people could use to help make their decisions before they go to a given area. And they could help, it could help people decide, I'm not going to go over there because there's a lot of people there today. Or there's a lot of people over there. I want to go join that party. Take the time to learn more about what the actual proposals are. I think a lot of information is flying around, not all of it fully accurate. So please go on our website, take a look, and then provide your input. We really need to hear from this community. We need to make good decisions. It's really an important time. We've got serious challenges facing our marine environment, and we depend upon these resources. So help us make smart choices for the future and for our kids and for our grandkids.
Yes. And I agree with that. I know when growing up, when I was, 12 years old, the first time I went scuba diving was in Jamaica, and it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I fell in love with scuba diving.
Ah.
But then when I was a little bit older, I went to Cancun. There's so much construction there, the reef was completely dead. What a disappointment that was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we want kids to, be able to have that experience here. And what I really hope is, because I heard a couple of young scuba divers, one was 12 and one was 16, and they'd only been diving here in the Keys at Lukey for a couple of years. And they were telling me how they have seen in the last few years that reef deteriorating. These are young, new divers. What I hope is that one day they are telling the story and they are bearing witness to that turning around, not telling the story of the reef demise, but telling the story of the reef recovery. That is what I hope in this process that we can achieve, is really turning things around for our reefs, because right now they need our help.
So how long does it take to restore a reef? Is it indefinite, or is it?
Well, that's a great question.
happening?
I just received an email from a colleague who had done some reef restoration in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. And he showed some photographs of some of the elkhorn coral that they had put in place. And it had, in just a couple of years, really transformed a barren reefscape into a really, vibrant reef system. So in a couple of years, you'd be amazed at what you can accomplish. Now, that doesn't mean we can do that for the entirety of the Florida Keys. Sure. It's going to take a whole lot longer than that. Our plans right now are kind of on a 20-year horizon, but I think we can do really good work and see a difference in a couple of years if we're really dedicated to it.
Okay, so let's recap. So we can assure the people that they will be able to go to Marathon Lighthouse or Sombrero Beach or Sombrero Reef Lighthouse.
Yeah.
We're not telling anybody they can't go there. It's not.
That's right.
Final.
Thank you.
This is not a written in stone proposal. When's the next proposal come out? How many proposals will there be before it's final?
Great question. So again, our public comment ends at the end of January. So we've got several more months for people to really dig into this, understand it, and provide us their input. And then we will take all of that input, synthesize it into a single alternative. How long that will take depends upon how diverse the comments are that we get, and how challenging it is to take all of that and create one. And then we'll put it back out for public comment. We're hoping that that's, a few months, not years by any means. But then, of course, we all know that in the fall there's an election. And so, of course, that may play into this in some way that we can't predict right now. But again, this is a state decision. This is a federal decision. This is a community decision. So there's a lot of voices involved in this decision. So that means it takes a while.
Okay, so it's going to be a long time before.
It's going to be a while. It's not going to be next month. I wish it would.
Well,
Sometimes I wish it would, but then again, I don't know.
So how many more meetings do you think you're going to have to do?
Oh, well, just in this part of the process, we've got 6 more, I believe, tonight, and then we've got a couple of Sanctuary Advisory Council meetings. We added an additional oral comment opportunity here in Marathon. We've got 2 more on the mainland. So we've got a lot of opportunity for people to get engaged.
So, folks, we have the word from Sarah Fangman that you will be able to go to Sombrero Lighthouse with your boat, hook up to a mooring ball, then nobody's trying to keep you off the reef or these other areas. There will be some areas, and we have to sacrifice for the future of ourselves and future generations to enjoy the reefs. So is there anything else you'd like to add about the rumors, the access people will have or not have?
Other than just please get involved, let us know your thoughts, help us solve these problems, help us come up with the right solutions to address the challenges that our resources are facing. We'd really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy you came on the show to
Thanks for having me.
Dispel some of these rumors, and hopefully we can move on forward together.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.